Fritz has a good story.
Yes.
Well, my story starts, I was supposed to, my good friend that I always hung around with, Bob Jones, he was my partner in crime. We went to Florida together. We went every place together. And he had this girlfriend, and she kept trying to hook me up with somebody because every time he halfway started getting serious, I'd take him away again, and we'd go somewhere. So she said, I got this gal I'm working with. I'm going to go over. I said, okay, no problem. Well, at the time, I was working for Norfolk King Seed Company, and I had been way over in the thumb. And it was a crummy day. I mean, it was snowing and blowing. I was supposed to go over there this night. I got about halfway back, and I got off and got a payphone and called and said, hey, there's no way I'm going out tonight with her. By the time I get back, I'm going to be completely whipped because it was just, you had to just really pay attention. Well, she told her, I stood her up.
Oh.
And in fact, I did not. So it's about 2 or 3 weeks later is St. Patrick's Day, and my buddy and 3 of his friends, they all lived on this great big old lumberman's house right on Center Avenue in Bay City, and there's always the St. Patrick's Day parade goes by there. And they always had a big party, and so I was at the party, and his girlfriend called Luann and said, hey, come on over, because there's some other guy that she'd kind of been looking at. He's here. She said, oh, okay, so she was at some other party, and she came over, and by the time she got there, this other guy was gone. She said, well, I'll introduce you to Fritz. And Lou really didn't care to meet me, but she introduced me to her, and then they all took off. And so we're just making small talk, and I said, hey, what kind of car do you drive? And she looked out the window, and there's a white Corvette parked right there. She said, well, that's my car. I said, really? And I said, how can you afford it? Oh, my dad buys it. He takes care of me. She gave me this whole big, long line of BS. And about 15 minutes later, they come back in, her girlfriend come back in, and they say, hey, you know what kind of car this girl drives? No. She's got that white Corvette right out there. Well, it was my car.
Oh.
And she didn't know it. So everybody just burst out laughing because they all knew whose car it was.
What are the chances of that happening?
Yeah, what are the chances?
We love that story.
So I said, we got talking then. I said, well, how'd you like to go out tonight? She said, well, I've got a date. I said, get rid of him. And so she did. I got over there, and he was still there. This other guy she's supposed to go out with, and
I bet he didn't have a white vet.
no. And she went up and talked to him, so he backed out, and I pulled in. And the rest is history.
What did
Oh,
she
no, no,
say?
no,
It
no,
sounds
no,
like
no.
she realized that was your car.
Oh, she just felt like about this big. It was great, but I figured if a girl could go with that kind of line, she's got to be all right. She's pretty cool. She's thinking on her feet the whole time.
So how old are you at this time?
I was 26 at the time, and she was
18.
18 or 19, because she's 7 years younger than me. And it was a year later we got married. I was 27. She was 20.
She in school or anything?
She was going to U of M at the time. And so I was working, like I said, for Norfolk King Seed Company. I made a lot of trips to Ann Arbor.
That's a good town.
And it was a company car, and they were paying for the gas, so it was all good. So
I like what you did at the wedding when she didn't know that you were gonna sing a song.
yeah,
Was it filmed?
no, it was taped though. They didn't have film back then. That's a long time ago. We've been married. This will be 39 years this
Oh
year.
my gosh. So what did you sing?
One Hand, One Heart from West Side Story.
Oh wow.
You want to try it right now?
No, I couldn't do it.
You did it in
Did
the
you hum it?
No, I sang it.
You did this in the ceremony?
Yeah. My dad saw me get up because we were there, and I got up and walked. He thought I was leaving.
Oh my word! Oh my
He thought I was walking out of the service.
Was he getting ready to tackle you?
I don't know. But he thought for sure I was heading out.
Did that make her cry?
Nah. Now, Freddie Penner did the service, and there was one of the big funny things was her middle name was Clara, and I believe Luann Clara, and both of her bridesmaids had never ever heard her middle name, and they burst out laughing.
That's my
Yeah.
mother's name.
And well, once you get the giggles and you're nervous, then they couldn't stop.
And she couldn't stop.
She couldn't stop.
Oh no.
And Freddie got kind of mad.
Oh.
Hey, now, straighten up here. This is serious.
Now, what church were you married at?
At the Middle Street People's Church,
Same
also.
father, right?
Yep.
And Bill and I. Yeah.
Well,
Is
three
that
of
church
us
still
were.
there?
Oh,
Yeah, it's Middle Street Baptist now.
yeah. And where was the reception at?
Right there at the
Right
church.
here, okay.
In the basement.
So
Where
that
was yours? Was it a basement too?
It was a dry wedding. I remember her brothers and cousins and everybody.
Oh, I'll bet
I
they were.
remember that.
That was, they were used to dry weddings.
Especially the groom is supposed to supply the
Supply
bar.
of food, you
Yeah.
bet.
Oh.
And there was no food.
Not in the
But
church.
they were outside.
Oh, yeah.
Billy had it was either his pickup or in the trunk, and there's a bunch of guys that went out and had a drink out at the.
Boy, that's one thing I never did.
Likely story.
Oh my!
Yeah, so
Wow.
that's our tales of woe.
That's cool.
I think the younger generation will like that.
That's the end of the end of the story.
Yeah.
And that's the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Yep. Huh?
And you were married in August,
June.
June. So what do I know?
June of 78 or
79.
79.
Pardon?
You got married in June, Daddy died in July.
Well,
In,
that
in
Thanksgiving.
November.
Oh, I was gonna ask you,
79.
you have
Enough, I thought.
We were
how old was she
67.
when she
Where's
passed?
your
Aunt
ring?
Mary?
I hadn't turned it
87.
on.
87, okay. And what was the year?
I,
2002.
2002. The year of 9/11.
No, I know for a fact 2001 was when my mother passed away, and that was 9/11.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she was 2002.
Okay. Yeah, she died in 2002.
You would know,
No.
So let's imagine that 16 years ago.
There you go. So,
Not really.
Yeah.
Kids.
My grandma Schmidt died in Florida.
Oh.
It was the last year we went to Florida, and I happened to be with her because to go comb her hair. She was in the hospital. She had congestive heart failure, and one of the interesting little tidbits was she was in the hospital. There were a row of telephone booths outside of her room, and Daddy had called. Albert was back up in Detroit to tell him that Grandma was in the hospital. Not that we thought it was the end or anything, but that she was hospitalized. So he jumps in the car to come to Florida. One day, she's in the hospital a day, and that evening I went to this church service, this big 100-day revival, and then I went across to visit her and comb her hair, and she died in my arms.
Wow.
And Daddy followed me by 5 minutes, and so he came when she was still in the bed. And right about then, the phone rang, that telephone number that Daddy had called Albert from, and Albert was now in Kentucky or Tennessee on his way south. And Daddy was able to tell him that she just died. And so he turned around, went home, and then Mama accompanied the body on the train because she was taken back to Michigan and buried in
And
Kentucky.
you didn't ride the train with them?
No.
Mom and I did.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And your mother passed away on Easter morning.
Yes. March the 31st.
Lou and I were there for that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Right.
We had been there and we went home
Uh-huh.
that night. Yeah, we had just been there and looked back to Traverse City and got the phone call almost when we walked in the door.
Yeah.
From one of
Yeah.
you.
Easter morning.
Yes, and it was, her death was a blessing because she had very, very serious osteoporosis. And she got up during the night and in confusion tried to go across the room to the bathroom, and she fell and broke her leg. And the fracture was so serious they couldn't operate on it. Her bones were brittle. They would have had to remove her leg, kind of below the knee. And at that point, I don't know that she knew that, but all desire to live left her. And she
Well, she was in such pain.
She
Yeah.
was.
She went to the hospital, and then they sent her back to the nursing home. And I don't know, there was no cast or anything, but they pinned it or something. It was a break just below the joint. And in moving her or turning her, it broke again. And I know she was terrible.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I spent the
It
night
was
with her that one day.
unbearable, I think, for her.
Yeah, there was, and at that
And they
point,
didn't have any painkillers at the hospital.
Well, and we called, remember we
Yeah.
called Andrew, and whatever they were giving her wasn't working. And so the pills that they give her, that worked. Because she was just such excruciating pain. And anyway, I think Amy got in on a deal too. They
Well,
couldn't
I did.
believe that they didn't have, they had them, but they were saving them for something else.
No.
And I think Andrew and Amy got a hold of the pharmacy or the doctor or whoever.
Well, you said something
And
too.
anyway, they gave her these pills and then that would relieve her pain. But the morphine or whatever they were giving her just didn't have any effect.
And that was like 24 hours.
Yeah, it was terrible.
horrible.
She would just lay there and moan and scream.
and she had enough dementia that there wasn't enough, to communicate adequately with her.
Last day or two was rough.
Before the funny thing, well, not funny, but it's humorous because the dementia had taken over, and I can remember had my work truck. And I don't know why I was there, but I stopped in the evening to see her. It was always, oh well, look at who I was just thinking about you, and you'd walk out of the room and come back. I was just thinking about you.
It's
Yeah.
Groundhog Day.
But yeah, but she wanted to go home, and she said, "Well, I'll go with you." And I said, "Mom, you can't come." I said, "I got my work truck." What? Well, I can ride on the roof. I said, "No, there's no room here on the side." That's what it was. There's no room here. My front seat, it's just a single pickup. And, well, I'll ride on the roof. I'm gonna go home. No, Mom, you just wait till tomorrow. She was bound determined she was gonna get out of there and she was gonna go home. And she could look at the same 3 photographs, and by the time she got to the third one again, well, look at here.
It's all new.
It's all brand new, and she'd start over and over again.
Bill said you could buy her a newspaper for a month and she'd read every day. Oh, look at you.
But remember when Goodman came though?
Yeah, they came and they went in, and I don't know, she didn't read much of anything else, but she read a letter, and she could read and talk German with them, and they said that it was absolutely it was their dialect, that they knew where it was. She knew every word.
See, that's long-term memory, right?
Well, I don't know what it is, but she
Yes.
she couldn't remember anything, but she remembered that. She knew how.
Well, and I remember taking her for rides in the car, and I had a tape of hymns in the tape deck, and she could sing along every word, with that. But she didn't know that I had just been in the room if I walked out and came back.
Have you guys ever heard the song by the Booth Brothers? It's She Still Remembers Jesus' Name.
No.
You need to, because I just heard that about 2 months ago. I had to pull over because it is so perfect.
The Booth brothers.
The Booth Brothers, She Still Remembers Jesus' Name. It's a sweet, it
Yeah.
pertains to that, and it surely pertains to our mom right now.
Right.
But I heard something from someone that you have diaries by her.
I have probably 40 diaries,
Oh my goodness.
a box full, and I don't have a big locker at where I'm living, but I have this big, but until Sue is going to be moving into a new house, and so somebody's gonna have to
Take those in order.
take possession of those so that they are, and she diaried her whole life, and sometimes it'd be just an inch or two, but she,
Maybe we should send that to Legacy Box
yeah, that,
and to
Oh.
digitize them.
Oh, wouldn't that be?
you know what, I
awesome?
happened to think of one more story that I want Bill to tell that I think was so significant in that it ties in with the early part of their marriage. When this Vincent Taylor let them rent his home, and Bill, tell him about what he was.
He had, it was right across the section from where the homestead was. And it was an 80-acre farm that he had inherited, I guess, this Vincent Taylor from his father. And they were well-to-do, they had no children. He had
No heirs.
no heirs at all, and he's the one, him and his wife, allowed mom and daddy to move in where Ruth in the house, and then Ruthie was born there. And I remember they became friends. He used to stop over. He was, I don't know if he was a conductor, but he worked for the railroad. And back in those early days, railroad people were looked at, pretty favorably because it was a growing industry and it was good money. They had their own retirement. They didn't have to contribute to Social Security when that came along. Anyway, I remember him telling, well, I don't remember hearing it, but I remember my dad telling me that Vincent Taylor told him that when he died and when his wife and him died, that mom and dad were going to inherit that 80-acre farm. And so anyway, his wife passed away a few years before him. And first mom and dad went to the funeral, and they were friends. They would stop maybe once, twice a month if they were to go check out the farm, whatever. They'd stop over, and anyway, then after she died, he told my dad that he was going to give him the farm and his whatever else. And he said he had changed his mind because when his wife died, mom and dad did not send a spray of flowers to her funeral, to the wake.
You couldn't afford it.
Yeah, back in them days, $15, $20 was a lot of money, and you just, flowers aren't going to last. And, I'm sure mom wrote a card or whatever, but anyway, he said that Frank Bendick, who was a businessman in town, he owned the lumber yard, he sent a nice spray of flowers to the funeral home for his wife. And so he's going to leave Frank, who to this day, now his children own that 80 acres across the section.
Over a spray of flowers.
Yeah.
But how old was that guy when he decided that?
He was probably, I don't know.
There you go.
60 or 70s?
Yeah, I don't know.
He
I
wasn't
know
thinking well, yeah.
He gave
say?
gave my dad,
What?
well, his wife meant a lot to
60 or
him.
70.
And so did that spray of flowers,
He's a
evidently.
man.
That was
Wow. Because he gave my dad the choice after he died, that he could go in his house or garage and take all his tools. He did give him something, but he took that big carrot and hid it away.
Didn't he get the railroad watch?
Yeah,
He got an old pocket watch that,
yeah,
because it was engraved on the back was a picture of a train,
locomotive, yeah.
a locomotive.
Where is that
What
now?
happened to that?
That is in my closet.
Oh,
Is
really?
it? Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Really?
Oh,
You
yeah.
have to show us sometime.
There was Elgin watch, and those things back then, I don't remember, but they had to keep time. That was before electronics and all this. It was a mechanical watch. It's quite large, and it's in good shape. Got a nice stainless steel.
But it was a railroad watch. Yeah, that's what.
Antique Roadshow would tell you what that thing is worth.
Yeah.
It's very valuable.
Yeah, there
But
you go.
isn't that a crazy story that the difference between 80 acres and a spray of
spray of
flowers?
flowers.
Yeah.
It was meant to be, you have to think that way.
Yeah.
right? Because it turned on a dime and you had nothing to do with it really. There's nothing else you could.
It's his prerogative to do, and that might not be the whole story. It could have been that him and this Frank Bendick became better friends or whatever, I don't know. I have no way of knowing. But that was, Daddy told me, he said, he costed him the farm by not getting his wife a spray of flowers.
But boy, he saved their, when you were born, to give them that
Oh, yeah,
house. Wow.
That's
yeah. That was, they were living there, and so they were familiar with that whole.
Listen to that.
So I'm interested to know, for people that don't know anything about the farm and that, if you could kind of explain how the farm was situated, the buildings and what roads they were near and the neighbors, etc., just the amount of acreage and how it was connected to the other farms, etc.
Well, where the farm homestead is now, I don't really have no way of knowing how many acres that really entailed at one time, because I know Uncle Freddie would, every time he'd get short of money or need a car or need to go to Florida, he'd come to my dad and mom and say, I want to sell this 20 acres. And they'd buy it. So some of the land that we own today was purchased from the original homestead, which my grandfather and mother homesteaded. I guess from what I understand, another story that I don't know if it's ever been told was, as far as I know, it's a true story, that Grandpa had came over, Grandpa Schmidt, my dad's father, before
His wife.
his wife. They had 1 or 2 children back in Germany, or Poland, as Diane says. And anyway, he called he had saved up enough money, and he called for her and the kids. I don't know if it was Freddie.
Emma.
Emma was the older.
There was another older, Dorothea that died of
Anyway, she had 2 or 3 kids, and so they came over, and they come up on a train, and Grandpa was working in a stave mill, which was right by the railroad tracks.
Stave, making barrels.
Whiskey barrels, and he's waiting for him. She's supposed to come in on this train at 2 or 3, whatever time, and she doesn't get off. Well, she can't understand, speak English. All she knew was German, and she had gotten the conductor, whoever, got their stories mixed up. She was supposed to get off at Pinconning, and somehow they thought she gets off in Pimquaming, which is up by the bridge. And so she goes right on by. He's waiting, all of a sudden the train leaves, and his wife and 2 kids are on it, and they're heading up north. And she had no way of knowing where she was, who she was, couldn't speak any English to anybody, and somehow she got up there and realized there's nobody there to pick her up with these 2 kids. And so she says, you got the story squared away or whatever, if she had paperwork. So they send her back to Pinconning, and Grandpa, a day or 2 later, he'd gone home or whatever, and so they started. I don't know where they lived. I never did hear that.
They lived in the grain, what was ultimately the granary.
Yeah,
Across the driveway
I can
from where
remember
the old house.
Yes,
that building
next
was,
to the barn, the
there
big
was
barn.
a cast iron kettle and then it was all made with mud and straw above it, and that's where they cooked. In that, and Daddy said him and Albert slept in a bedroom. It was about 4 foot wide, and every so many days they'd get some fresh straw. That's what they slept on, was the straw in the edge of the corner of the house. And even in the cold weather, that they had evidently feather ticks and whatever to keep warm.
Now, when you talk about the old homestead, is that the place we visited as children to come up and visit you?
No,
No,
no, that would be the house that was taken by the highway.
Yeah, that's Kodiak.
Cody.
Yeah.
the homestead was always like a mile behind
Where
us.
Grandpa and Grandma Schmidt lived. A mile, almost a mile away, off the road.
It's right
That
there.
was the old homestead.
The old
That's
That
the
was the
original.
original.
So
the
when
big
did you
barn
move
is.
into the house on
Well,
Cody?
it's been
Well, that was after
our son.
Mom and Daddy were married, and
That's what they're
when
talking
he built that house, because
about.
he bought that 60 acres that sat on. A blank,
How many
These are when
acres
the
did he get when he first came? Because he homesteaded, they give him X amount of
200,
acres if he was
260
clear.
acres or
Oh,
200.
they didn't give it all to him at one time, I don't think.
No,
Yeah,
like, over the course
If he
of
was
20
clear,
years.
it was his free and clear.
well, and how did, what the deal was that how he got that 60 acres where we grew up. And, but it was a blank, it had to be all those buildings, the house, the granary, the
Yeah,
chicken
when
house.
they moved there, I remember really Mom or Daddy telling me that was a hay field. That 60 acres was all into hay.
Are you talking about on Cody?
Yeah, Cody, yes.
So you're saying your grandparents lived there first?
No,
Oh.
They owned it?
They
They
were nearby.
they
Okay.
owned it, yeah.
I
The
don't
home
know.
they built is where.
I don't know.
There's a picture at Bud's now, up in Interlaken, of Daddy, where he was out in Mount Forest, or wherever he was cutting trees
Mhm.
and cutting the board wood to build the house.
Well, I had thought that somebody said he took a barn down to get the
Well, he
wood.
did.
To build that
huge
house.
barn? And while he was taking it down, him and Ralph Cox went out in the woodshed, they put on their gloves and they were boxing, and Ralph flipped him a good one and broke a couple ribs. Daddy's
Ralph
ribs.
was a boxer, wasn't he?
Well, they fooled around.
Amateur.
He was no
He was an amateur boxer, he was.
Well, he was a big guy, he was
Yeah.
about 6'3".
And he was much younger than Daddy.
He
was
broke
15,
his
20
ribs?
years younger.
Now
But they like to swear of it.
I can remember the day that Daddy lost his eye.
I can remember
That
that
we
too.
wanted to know
What
about.
year?
Oh,
Well, I don't know what year.
Is that still
Because he
going?
replaced it, because he was
I-
with one eye for 20, 30 years.
All I remember is that he was outside working on that plow, and we were inside, and I was young, but all of a sudden he came in and sat at the end of the table, and he's dripping blood, and what happened, and
He said, Mama, I think I lost my eye. Then he took his hand and went, whoa.
I thought it happened where they had the big gas tank in the yard, and he was with a crank.
No, he was working on a plow, on them old trip plows,
It was my plow.
and
We
he
were
was
on
working
plow.
on it, and I don't know what he did with that trip
Well,
loader
it
came
was in
in.
October and it was cold and I was freezing. I couldn't feel my feet. And it was just cold, middle of October. So there was no cabs or anything on it. We each had a plow. And the plow I was pulling, I'd pull the trip lever and I'd pull it forward. The plow would come up out of the ground and go back down, go up and go back down because he wouldn't go back to the cog and catch it. And so he said, well, let's go home and you can warm up and I'll fix it. So I went in the house and he takes the plow, it was hooked to the tractor, he takes the old railroad jack he had and put it underneath it, and he was trying to see what was making it stick, why that lever would stay forward. So anyway, he pulls it forward and it stuck. And then he went and got the jack, puts the jack under it, and he's moving it like this, and as he moves the plow, it had a spring about this long,
Yeah, I remember
the lever
that.
about this high. It come flying back and hit his glasses, and actually the glass from the glasses broke, cut his eye, and the fluid leaked out. And because I remember I was sitting in front of the heater with my shoes off, trying to warm up my feet, and I remember him coming in and saying, "Marion, Marion," and then I remember going in the kitchen, and like you said, there he's sitting,
sitting at the end of the table.
in terrible pain. Because then she took him to the hospital, and I remember he said he felt every crack in the road, that your eye has so many nerves or whatever in it.
So for many years, he drove to Florida all over with one eye. And when you try doing that, you see what a handicap it is. It was fortunate
I
that
remember him getting that it looked like an eye, it was a cap, that he would open up and put that in, because
He left it in all the
Yeah,
time. At the end, he had a glass eye made,
yeah,
and he painted it like his other eye.
How old was he
But-
when that happened?
Oh, he probably 7, 6, no,
Probably
no,
60s.
50s.
yeah,
late
so
50s.
maybe 60s or 58,
How
60.
old were you?
well, we were young, so we were probably
He was 50 when I was born, so probably
Oh,
when I
yeah.
was about 4 or 5. So when it happened, I was pretty young, I remember that.
Oh,
It was in the
wow.
late 50s, I think.
I remember he used to, I always sat next to him at the table, and after that, he always used cream in his coffee, and he'd take the creamer or the milk, and he'd pour it in his mess, because his perception distance was off, and he'd spill it, he'd make him so mad, you know, that he made a mess.
Oh.
I have a story of Grandpa. I'd like to tell.
Yes.
Come on over here,
Come on over
John.
here.
I was like 5 years old.
Come and sit in my
Oh,
chair.
here, I'll sit right there. I'll sit right there.
You're the oldest boy grandchild or how is this?
I was like 5 years old, and I was at Grandpa and Grandma's house for Christmas. And I was playing with marbles in the living room. And I remember they had Steelies. And I was just a little kid. I didn't know what I was doing. And I swallowed one. And it got lodged right here. And I literally couldn't breathe. And somehow Grandpa was like across the room on a rocker, saw me, ran over, picked me up, and just shook me. And all of a sudden, the Steely popped out. And
Oh,
I'm literally here today because
Yes.
wow.
No Heimlich.
He lost a brother with the marble.
of that. Did he?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
So maybe
Eddie.
that's
Eddie, little Eddie, he was like 2 years
Oh
old.
my.
And I remember him saying that they were eating, and there was a marble on the floor, and he picked it up and got it in his throat, and he died. He choked and died.
I think he was
and
like 2.
Grandma grabbed, he was like 2 and a half, grabbed him and run all the way to town, down the railroad track,
Oh.
to the
Oh my.
doctor. Here he's dead, you know, he was already succumbed, and, but she cried, you know, run, couldn't stop her, she was
my.
taking him to the doctor or whatever.
Oh. So John, that's probably why he remembered that other
Well,
story.
yeah, I know that I literally was not breathing. And he just shook, and all of a sudden it popped out.
Oh, thank God for
Man.
that.
Wow.
Were your parents around?
I don't remember them around.
No, I don't
know where they were.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know how it would be that we weren't there.
Yeah.
Brother too far.
You'd abandon them. You just dropped them off and went.
They used to tell you
But
something. They
I
dropped you
knew
off.
I wasn't wanted.
I know that Grandma,
Only
mourned
son,
Eddie.
yeah, right.
Through the years, she would refer to Eddie. And Emma lost a daughter to diphtheria, and she mourned her whole life. Because I think she was 17. I mean, I don't think she was a small child, and she died. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
This
That's
Eddie, where the heck did he come from?
Yeah, I don't remember
He would
ever
have
hearing
been
about that.
probably between Daddy
And Johnny,
and John and Martha were the twins.
yeah,
The last. They were the last.
Martha was married to Thurno, right?
yeah.
Now,
What'd she die from?
cancer. She was 5'10", a very large woman.
Whoa.
And I remember at her funeral, she was nothing but a rack of bones.
I
Very,
remember that feeling.
yeah, it was very,
Yeah.
if she, you know,
So who was the oldest? Was it Emma?
Emma was the oldest.
And then Freddie,
And
Albert.
Albert, Daddy,
John and Martha.
John and Martha.
And
But
Eddie,
didn't they lose a child coming from Russia to?
they could have. And I'm thinking when you talked about the story of her landing, she landed, I think it's in Baltimore. I found it written down in Johnny's memorial book after he died. And that was the first we knew that when she came, and for some reason it looks like it was Martha's writing. And to think she came all across the ocean, and in those days it was sometimes like a month traveling with 2 little kids, then getting on a train. What do you have for food? Diapers.
What do you have for money?
Well, that,
How do you do
knows?
that?
And then
And can't speak the language.
And can't speak the language.
When it lands in Pinconning, and not knowing that was, and then sending her
Wrong
up
place.
almost to the bridge, and then back down before she finally ended up at destination.
Yeah.
I, you know,
I don't travel by myself.
a
Why didn't
story.
they just text her?
All the trouble they could have saved. Just
Yeah.
you can call.
Excuse me.
Did she learn
And she never learned to read or write. So that her whole life, she never was able to read the Bible or anything. And we were talking earlier, she had a very lonely life, living kind of with Freddie, back on that farm, half a mile from, no, she never really became friends with any of her neighbors. And unless she was driven to town for anything, she lived alone there. And I can still see her sitting in a rocker by the window that looked out toward 7 Mile Road, and she's rocking, and what do you do?
But the grandfather learned English?
Well, enough to, but there were so many immigrants in those days, so that I think, I don't know.
If only we would have had English as a second language program.
Yeah.
Yes, there
Well, he knew, I forget how many languages.
He knew French, he knew Polish, he knew German,
That's how
Russian,
Europe was.
Jewish.
That's how the immigrants were.
Yeah.
Grandpa Schmidt, my grandpa.
Yeah.
And he was a veterinarian.
Yeah, I knew.
I know, I have a big, thick book written in German because he became the village vet in Pinconning in his, when he arrived. And he would help with animal deliveries and, there was sick cattle and whatnot, and he would go out and treat them and take
What
care
year
of them.
was that?
That would have been in the,
Early 1900s. 1903,
the teens and the
1910,
20s.
somewhere there.
I in my album at home, I culled them all and made a book, and there's a picture of them building that house and the date, and I think it's like 1920 that they built the house that sits there today. And one of the interesting things, we're trying to figure out what in the world this poor immigrant travels from Russia and comes to America, and he ends up in, I have one of the colored glass windows that were in the living room. There were 2 windows, and when they were demolishing the house, getting ready for my folks to move in, the work crew was there, and they had thrown one of those windows away, and Mama salvaged the other one, which I still have today, and it's in my apartment where I'm living right now. And then he would buy that and a pump organ. I mean, which to me are such lavish things for farm out in the country. But obviously he
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 was
had an
a
eye
brewer.
for beauty.
I remember Daddy
And
saying
music.
they'd
Music
be on
was
cutting up roots
in Europe.
and working in the field, and they'd come in the house for lunch.
oh yeah,
Grandma
that's
always
right.
knew.
10:20.
She'd come out at 10 o'clock with a basket
He
with
might have been
sandwiches,
born in a different
a
house.
snack in the morning,
It's actually
and
a
then
big
they'd
house,
come
you
in
know, it's
at noon.
kind of a big house.
Then the kids would go out and they'd play in the yard, in the sand or whatever. And they said Grandpa would always take that 15, 20-minute siesta. He'd lay back in his big rocker and rest. And when he woke up, when they heard that spring on the spring door on the porch open, they took off running for the field. And then they worked the afternoon, like, if he was a crew of workers. But he said, Grandma, they always knew that about 2 or whatever time, Grandma would come with a basket and walk out into the field and bring a snack for everybody to have something to eat. That was, they looked forward to that.
Well, Mom used to do that when we were home
I
eating.
remember that.
But the other thing that I was thinking about Grandma when you said Grandma Schmidt, because she died the year I was born. Because she died in 50, and you came back from Florida.
Mama was pregnant with you, and
Yeah,
that's why
and
she
then
went
I
on the
was
train.
born in the end of May. But the fact of leaving your family and going here, coming to the States, not knowing a soul, and then never seeing your family, we don't have any idea what if she had brothers or sisters, and apparently she did. What happened to them? That's
We
a whole.
probably have a number of heirs that, are in Europe yet,
Yeah.
and could have
Tons of them.
What was your
Maybe a
name?
lot.
Winterthur. Her maiden name was
Unusual.
Winterthur, and for some reason, I don't know how it happened, but Daddy always referred to her first name as Augusta. And yet, when I found her papers, she was Justine. Her wedding application, she was Justine. And so where the Augusta came from, in fact, I didn't find anything that listed her name as Augusta.
Oh.
But one other thing that, Bill, you have to tell about Grandpa being mad at Albert for fixing up
Oh, yeah. Well, of all the kids, I think Albert had the most
the mechanical.
inventious ideas. He was always trying something new and, out of the ordinary. And evidently, once a week or so, Grandpa would go to town and get groceries, flour, sugar, and stuff. And Albert, while he was gone, sometime, I don't know if he'd stay over in town or what, but anyway, he was gone for a while. When he come back, Albert was supposed to plow the field east of the house. They'd go plowing north and south, and he'd walk behind the plow. Well, he found a wheel somewhere, and he made a little seat with the wheel under it so he could ride. He had it attached to the plow, and he was sitting riding on this plow instead of walking. And Grandpa, then he said he remembered. Grandpa turned the corner and he started coming down, and the closer he got, the faster the horse was going. And he got up there and he jumped across the ditch and he went and pulled Robert off of that seat and took that contraption that he had made and smashed it over the plow into I don't know how many pieces and said, "You walk, you ain't gonna make that horse pull you around. You walk." He was old fashioned. And I remember Daddy saying when they went from horses to tractors, he was very resistant because he said the black smoke from those tractors was blowing down on the ground, and that's going to ruin the ground. It's no good, horses was the only way. And then, of course, he realized.
If he saw it today.
Yeah. Oh.
Wasn't there something about he was so strong he carried something real
He
heavy
carried a
somewhere?
plow from town.
What?
Yeah. He got a plow when he first came there, and he carried the plow on his shoulder to carry it home. He had no other way to get it home.
The sad thing is, though, I never can remember my dad having a nice thing to say about his father, other than he was mean.
I know.
He never had a kind word, or never that he would joke or laugh. All he ever talked about was how mean he was. He was like a general in the service. The kids were his workers, and there was no love there of any kind. I don't think, because
But then that's why he built that big house. They were all supposed to get married and come home and stay in that house.
that didn't work out very good.
Yeah, that didn't work.
And you say he was a veterinarian.
Well, I think a man made one.
Trained
He trained himself with books or whatever. Because I can remember going in the old parlor. It was like doctors carried. It was a pretty good sized satchel, and they had, those things that forceps.
Forceps.
Yeah, and knives and glass tubes and medicine. It stunk like crazy from whatever.
A trocar?
I don't know what it was.
But his main livelihood was farming, you think?
Yeah, I think while he was in the Tsar's army, that he was probably trained as an auxiliary. He maybe expressed some interest in it, because when he landed in the States, apparently he became known to go and help deliver animals, horses, cows, and
But can you imagine the fact of leaving wherever you're coming from, Russia, and getting on a boat, and then ending up in Penconning and walking out and saying, "Okay, this is where I'm going to live." How in the world do you accomplish something like that? What?
But they all did that. That was what the
They must
immigrants
have had
did.
to clear the land.
Why would you do it?
It's like the migrants today. Why did they risk their lives and come over here? Because they want a better life.
Freedom.
It's not that hard to figure out.
But do you think it was woods where they had to clear the land?
No, yeah.
It was all virgin woods up there.
With very little tools, I imagine.
Horses, dynamite.
Wasn't World War I starting to kind of
This was
ferment
before
a little bit? I
World
know,
War
but
One, because he came over in
1800.
97 or
1898 or something.
Dan was born in 3, so.
some of them were draft dodgers. I mean,
And Freddie, it was in World War I. Freddie ended up,
Yep.
Did he ever talk about that?
well,
He
now,
was a medic.
was
I
he?
think, yep. He
I don't
worked in the
know.
hospital as like a,
And it was in Battle Creek, wasn't it?
yep,
Then he
Oh,
went to
that's
the
right,
Custer.
okay. Fort Custer.
yep.
Uh-huh.
He was a veteran.
But all I remember Freddie was just always this, you know, you couldn't call him a farmer, but every day he was going to town 2 times a day for coffee. And it was just,
Yes, Freddie's life was fun. He made the best of everything.
But also Albert was more serious.
Oh, yeah.
well, Albert was in Detroit. I don't remember him, and other than him coming up.
Those two brothers died 2 days apart, and they had a joint burial.
Yeah, I remember we was at the hospital to see Uncle Freddie, and Uncle Albert had already passed
And they were
away.
all in their 70s.
And he said,
Yes, early.
Yeah.
I said, it's too bad you're not going to be at the funeral. He said, I'll be there.
Oh,
He
really?
told me that. He said,
So I know the night
I'll be
that he
there.
died,
Wow.
I was there and I remember grabbing his foot and said, well, I'll see you tomorrow. You know, I'll be over tomorrow after work or whatever. And he said, you might see me, but I won't see you. And then he died that night. So he
Really?
knew that was Freddie.
And how old
Yeah.
were you guys?
Yeah. I was
Teenager?
20.
Probably 14, 15.
No, I was 20. I was
I was like 14, 15, I think.
And he died, that was at 65, wasn't it? I think that's what the gravestones say.
Yeah. I think it is.
65, so I'd have been 15, you must have been 14, 13.
Fred was engaged to be married,
Freddie was?
and she called off the wedding like the week of the wedding because they already had the food ordered and
Really?
yeah,
Why?
I don't know.
She was a Detroit girl, wasn't she?
Yeah,
From the
she
city.
married a guy from our church, or Psyche, but
became Mr. Michigan. Right?
their son.
Oh, that their boy.
There's 5 minutes left.
What was I just gonna say?
And Uncle Albert, was he married?
He was married.
Briefly.
I don't know.
Yes, I think it was a no.
Yeah, I remember going to Uncle Albert's as a young boy, and he had pictures of Marilyn Monroe pasted all over his kitchen. Yeah.
I remember going to, well, we'd go to Shirley's house, but then Uncle Albert come pick us up.
Well, but
And he
we riding
took
the
us-
bikes over, he was like
Yeah, it was
2
just
blocks or
a couple
3 blocks
blocks away
straight
from
over.
us.
But he took us someplace,
That's
the
right.
only time I ever had mulberries. He took me someplace, some hospital or something, had mulberry trees.
Really?
And yeah, he said, you gotta try these. He said, go ahead. They were good.
I remember when he died, and Daddy was the executor, and he had to get rid of all the stuff. And I remember carrying stuff out of Albert's basement. He lived upstairs. He rented the downstairs, and he lived upstairs, but the basement was his. And we had to get all the stuff out of there. And he had, I don't remember, it was 2 or 3 car radiators with fans and stuff. That was his air conditioning. He would run water through those radiators, cold water, city water, and then he had those fans. But it was cool air. On a hot summer day upstairs, he had them in the windows, you know, or
Smart.
I imagine in the windows. He'd blow the hot air out and the cool air in, and that was his air conditioning. That was before air conditioning was probably even heard of. It was very big. He made his own.
And Daddy, our daddy, worked in Detroit with Albert in the building industry for a few years. Sometime since Daddy was 29 when he got married, there was that whole period from 2018 to almost 30 where he did different things, and he spent part of his life.
But he worked at Packard, didn't he?
Packard Motor Car Company. I can remember him
I
talking
remember
about
some
that.
story about him, Grandpa wanting him to come home because he was getting old and Daddy was supposed to farm.
He's supposed to harvest beets. He needed help harvesting beets. So Daddy come home and harvested the beets, and then he never went back. He stayed in Pinconning and
Beets,
farmed.
because I don't ever remember growing beets.
Oh yeah,
Now,
beets, because he had the beet fork and he had to load it, fork them on a doggone wagon.
Really.
And then they'd take him to the rail station and then take
Which
him to
was at
wherever.
Woodville.
Yeah,
We grew hay, wheat, corn, barley, and oats.
yeah. But Grandpa Schmidt, he must have grown beets because
Oh yeah.
that's how Daddy come home.
Well, Daddy and Mama grew beets too. Surprising you don't remember it.
when I was
I
there,
remember when I started growing beets, he was dead set against it. He said that they maybe it was just for a short period of time, but they got root rot. And they had a nice crop. They had a clean block. They used to go through and hire labor, and they'd thin them and block them. And they would put a beet every foot and clean the weeds out. And then they got root rot and they lost them. And they, at that time, which when I grew, you could borrow money from the sugar factory, the processor, to pay for your labor if you had expenses until you harvested. But then they would deduct it from your check in the fall when they harvested the beets. And so I remember he thought it was terrible because it was in tough times, and they had to dig in their own pocket to pay back the factory. They had no crop to harvest. The beets died. They got a root rot, a disease which they couldn't control, and so they had to pay the factory for cleaning these beets that they didn't have to harvest. It was just added to the insult to injury.
one of the big highlights was when oil was discovered, a gusher, on one of the lots, on one of the properties that they owned. And all of a sudden, within a couple days, the road was lined with people. Every oil company in the country was there trying to sign leases. And Daddy went through tremendous agony trying to decide if he should, because they were offering, all these different offers, and at that point, I guess he did sign for 1/8.
Daddy never did.
No, he didn't.
Any acre that they had, they have the full 1/8.
Okay.
Uncle Freddie and Aunt Grandma, they were a little, they weren't as trustworthy or as adventurous, and they sold half of their you could sell the mineral rights. The leases were written for 1/8. Everybody.
Well, that would have been the same thing.
There we go.
I remember sitting in the car with Daddy and just agonizing
There we go.
about making a decision.
Oh,
And just trying to decide what in the world should he do, whether they should sign, a lease.
What was his decision-making process?
Well,
How did he come up to
I
that
don't,
answer?
it was kind of a gamble, right?
Yeah.
It was a
Well, they
gamble.
were offered big money,
Eeny,
which,
meeny, miny, moe.
well,
No?
they'd weigh the good and the bad. Now, what if because there was no guarantee that there was oil down there.
And there wasn't,
No, at the time.
you could go
That
for
was before they drilled.
1,000 feet and there would be no oil, because this was a high, 1,700 feet deep. And then there was another layer of oil at 3,000 something.
Were they digging on other farms too,
Yeah, I'm
simultaneously?
sure.
Well, when the rig would get done in one hole, they'd move over on another one. And they might get oil, they might not. A lot of them were dry holes.
Because there's a field of several
Yeah,
farms
there
all
was,
around.
at one time there was 40-some wells.
But
But
how
the
many
last one that was drilled was in '57. That was the year that, I remember, Labor Day, they got through the formation. They had drilled and got in there earlier. They were done drilling for, I don't know, maybe 6, 8, 10 years. And then one day Daddy, Robert Major came over, who owned the oil field and the leases. And he said, what do you think if we put another well in back here on this 20 or 40, whatever it was? And Daddy said, yeah. So I remember we had planted it to beans, that field, and there was a road that went in a short distance, maybe 1/8 of a mile, to a well that was on a piece that Freddie owned, part of the original homestead. And he had sold him and Grandma had sold half of their mineral rights on all their wells and all their leases. So if they got, whatever the pay was, the guy in town that bought the lease for maybe, I have no idea how much it was, maybe $2,000. But $2,000 back then was like $200,000 today. It was big money because they didn't have nothing. And anyway, they put a road in and went back and went on an angle to a road to the well. And they drilled the well, put a slush pit in, set up a couple tanks, And they got down, I think it was under 2,000 feet, it was shallow. They weren't expecting it, but they got into a
Vein.
formation and they could smell gas. And it was 10 o'clock at night or whatever, or in the morning. Anyway, that day, the drillers union decided they hadn't settled, they'd been bargaining or whatever, so they went on strike. So I remember they brought in, I don't know how many truckloads of cement, and poured, there was an 8-inch casing going down to the formation. They poured it full of cement, sealed it off, and they left. And then it was like, I remember Labor Day, I come home from school, it was in the fall of '57, and the field of beans was dead ripe. It was, so they were ready to pull. And I remember I got off the bus and Mom said, you better grab a tractor quick and get over, and they struck oil, and the well blew, and there's about 5 acres that's covered with oil. So I went over, and here they had gone through, they settled their disagreement, their strike, they came back to work, and when they drilled through the cement, and they got down to the formation, when they hit the formation where the oil and the gas was, it blew that tool. It was about 20 foot long, about 4 or 5 inches in diameter, and it was tapered on the end. That's what drilled through the rock, and then they pumped water down and flushed that, threw it out. Anyway, that thing had, when they got into the oil formation, and with the gas pressure, it blew that tool out of the hole, which was 2,000 feet roughly, down in the ground, out past the top of the drilling rig, and the cables were all tangled up, and the drill came down, and the 2 guys that were working on that platform, they heard it coming, they could hear that drill. They knew what was the gas is popping and blowing, and so they went down. It was about 4 or 5 feet above the ground level. They had big thick planks where they would sharpen the drills and did all their work, and the controls and stuff were on. And they went down, and that thing went up, probably 20, 30, 40 feet in the air, and then came back down and went right through that flooring and just missed one of the guys that was down there trying to shut the valves off, because it's spewing oil, blowing oil 100, 200 feet in the air. And it was
a gusher.
It was a gusher like the old West, And it was, I remember the wind was out of the south or the northeast, and it blew. There was about 5 acres of that 20-acre field that was just black, for maybe 800, 900 feet. It went up that high, and the wind was blowing, and it took it over. Well, they wanted that covered up, and before the DNR or the DEQ, whoever it was back then, got wind of it. And so we're out there plowing under beautiful beans, but they're all black, covered with oil. And there was some trees and a fence line, those died because they got coated with oil. They finally got it shut down, and I don't know for how many days that it flowed before, because they didn't have the right valves and stuff on it. They never expected anything like that. They had never seen anything close to it. Usually there'd be oil while they put the drill, the pump down at the bottom and pump it. With this one, it had so much gas pressure. I remember it was, I think, 11 years that it flowed. They had a big valve, and I remember they had a big gauge on the very top. There was no pump jack or anything on it. And it had 500 pounds on the head up in the air on the top of that formation, or top of that hole. And the guy would come and he'd turn the valve open so many turns that he'd watch his watch. And it'd take 10 or 11 minutes, and then he'd close the valve, and it would have made its 40-barrel oil. It flowed for like 11 years with no pump or anything, just the gas pressure that it had.
There was another time, right about that time, that there was a gusher blew down near north of Bay City, and it was blowing, and for miles around was lined with cars to watch, and Red Adair, who was a guy who came in, and he capped it, and it was huge, and I was proud of it.
There, I forgot.
Yeah, Red
He came in and did it?
He came in and did
No
it.
way!
It was a big.
But they finally, this thing, they didn't have enough tanks. And I remember when that thing would flow, when it would start, when he'd open the valve and start flowing, them pipes would just shake, and the tank would shake, and the gas would come out of the the fumes out of the top of the tank, and then it would quiet down. And then all of a sudden you could hear it coming again. It would build up, the oil would flow in from the rock, and then it would start coming. You could hear it, and the pipes would shake.
So how
But it
much?
did that for I don't know how many days. They just had a pipe going out into the what they call the slush pit, and it was a dike that they had with a liner in it. And trucks called for 24 hours a day. There were semis coming in and hauling the oil out of that pit until somehow they got it controlled and got valves on it, and where they could shut it off and run pipe to the tanks. Cause they weren't ready for it. They weren't expecting anything. And that was the only well in the field. And that thing still pumps, or they're pumping it now. But I remember when that field was sold to the guys that own it now, Daddy asked Urban Major if he would sell him that well, his rights, so he'd have 100%. And I remember he wanted $100,000 for
Which
that
was
well.
In the 40s or
No, this was it would come in
Probably in the
57,
60s.
in the mid
65.
'60s, yeah. And I remember him and Mom talking about it, mailing it over, should we or shouldn't we? And anyway, they didn't. And but it's still, now it makes, I'd say in a day if they pump it for 15-20 hours, it'll make 8 barrel, maybe 10, but about 8 of it would be in salt water. So it makes, 4 times as amount of salt water as it does oil. It's a B1, the William Schmidt B1.
But had he bought it for $100,000,
He'd have quadrupled his money a few times probably.
Well, how much time did lapse from the time they actually struck oil to when they started getting money for it? And did it change your lifestyle?
I don't know. I think Ruthie would remember that. Because, see, that happened, that was the last well, and that was years after they had quit drilling in '57. So I don't remember much before that. 57, I was 13 years old.
Yeah, see, I graduated from high school in '51, so it happened when I would say, when the first well came in, probably when I was 15, maybe 14 or 15, and I honestly don't remember it making any difference. I mean,
Well, did Daddy sell the cows?
yes, it made a difference in that he didn't have to farm to the same degree, but I didn't understand
Back then,
that.
crude oil
The economics of it all, I
25
didn't.
cents a barrel.
and you were getting 1/8 of that.
He was
And he was getting 1/8 of that.
Yeah, they talk
Yeah,
about.
you get
Yeah.
$1 $3
Well,
a barrel. Well, that oil was a better grade. It was a green oil. It wasn't black. It was a green oil because it was in the Traverse or the shallow formation, and it was worth like a nickel or 7 cents a barrel more than the regular crude that they had been selling. But crude was $3.25, $3.50. Now today it's 68. So all that oil that was sold at $3-4 a barrel.
By the way, the one thing I remember is when this Red Adair came in and capped that well, there was fire. I mean, the sky glowed.
They're still burning oil there. I can remember
It was,
the kid
it was a
driving
But
through
isn't that what he
Colorado
was
thinking
famous
like,
for?
Yep.
Yeah,
Red
well,
Adair was
yeah.
capping
Sour gas.
fire.
The amount
It
of
was
oil that they pumped out of that field is just phenomenal.
Huh.
But you wouldn't have been able to go to Florida if you hadn't been able to sell the cows, would you?
right. Oh yeah, Daddy made that decision. I was 14 at the time, and he
Yeah,
was
the
sick
others
that
had people
winter.
What they get every 2 weeks
by
for the cows.
December,
He
he
sold
had
the
given
cows.
all of our animals and chickens and
I
everything.
can't relate to that.
Closed the
He
front
was
door,
not greedy.
no lock,
No, he
and
wasn't
off he
greedy.
went.
You
It's
never
amazing
thought to
how
live on it.
he made, but I think he felt like he had come so close to death, and he did not want to risk another winter. Whether it made a difference or not, I don't know, but.
And
Hey,
So why did
one
they quit?
What?
Why did you quit going to Florida?
Grandma died.
Grandma died.
So what that have to do with
Well,
anything?
and I was a senior
Don't
in
worry.
high school.
It might have been where they were going, that whole thing might have changed.
Yes,
I
began
think.
to
You
fade.
know, they were
Fellowship
getting
Fund.
onto this guy, he was a
844,
scammer.
I don't know if
He was a very,
I never
one of
answered.
her
He was
kids.
taking
Yeah,
these
but
old
usually
folks'
says it.
money and
It
promising
was
them
true.
a
It's an
place.
844 number.
I never
They
answered.
never happened, so I think
This number here is
Tell me where
Left us.
that fell apart. Well, then that
Hey,
was-
Ruthie,
Then he
one
went
of the
to
things
Ormond
is that didn't you say that one of the students or one of the people in your Florida classroom later became governor here of Florida?
The wife of the governor.
Or the wife of the governor?
Reuben, the name just came to me. Reuben, she married Reuben Askew. I was in choir with her, and he was a wonderful Christian man, and he was really quite a prominent Florida governor.
Askew.
Yeah.
Reuben Askew. And I happened to read it in the paper, and I wrote him and said, "Are you married to Donna?" I don't remember what her last name, but it was Donna something. And he wrote back and said, "Yes, he was." That was the relationship.
And he said, why do you ask me?
Yeah, why do you ask me? And it's none of your business.
The Secret Service was up at her doorstep the next day.
Right.